Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back to 8th century China, to the heart of the magnificent Tang Dynasty. And you are not just a spectator, you are the main character. Imagine you have just spent weeks, maybe even months, on the road, and you have finally arrived at the gates of the most cosmopolitan city on earth, Chang'an. This is not just a trip, it is a full-blown try-on haul, but for an entire lifestyle. And trust me, with the trends back then, you might feel a little underdressed at first. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It is a small click for you, but it makes a huge difference for this little corner of the internet. And while you are at it, I would love to see where you are all listening from tonight. Drop your city and the current time in the comments below. It is always fascinating to see our community scattered across the globe, all settling in for the same story. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. The dust of the road still clings to the hem of your simple hemp robe, and your throat feels as dry as the lowest plateau you just crossed. For days, the stories have been getting grander, the travelers more numerous, all flowing towards this single point on the map. And now, you see it, the word. It is not just a wall, it is a statement. It rises from the earth, a massive, imposing barrier of rammed earth, stretching further in each direction than your eyes can comfortably see. It is 35 feet high, thick enough for several carriages to ride abreast on top, and it seems to hold the entire world within its grasp. You follow the slow-moving river of people, camels, and ox carts through one of the main gates. The guards in their leather and iron armor give you a cursory glance. You are just another face in a torrent of new arrivals. The moment you step through the archway, the world changes. The muffled sounds of the countryside are replaced by a symphony of urban life. The air, thick with the smell of roasting chestnuts, exotic spices, and thousands of living, breathing bodies, fills your lungs. You are now standing on one of the grand avenues of Chang'an. It is impossibly wide, 150 meters across, straight as a spear throw, and lined with neat rows of locust and pagoda trees. This is a city built on a grid, a masterpiece of urban planning. Everything is orderly, divided into 108 rectangular wards, or fang, each one a miniature walled town within the larger city. You have heard the tales, but seeing it is something else. It feels less like a city that grew organically and more like a place that was willed into existence by a divine, geometrically obsessed mind. A mainstream historical fact is that Chang'an was at its zenith, the most populous city in the world. But here is a little tidbit. That order came at a price. Every night, at the sound of a great drum from the central drum tower, the gates to every single one of these 108 wards would be locked shut. If you were caught out in the main avenues after curfew, you were in for a rough night with the city watch. The vibrant, bustling metropolis of the day transformed into a silent, locked-down grid after dusk. You crane your neck, looking up at the multi-tiered pagodas, the sweeping tiled roofs of mansions, and the colorful banners fluttering from shops. You hear languages you cannot identify, the guttural tones of Sogdian merchants haggling over silk, the lilt of Persian, the chatter of Korean envoys. There are monks with shaved heads and saffron robes, fair-haired, blue-eyed men leading camels laden with goods, and officials in elegant, flowing silks. And then there are the locals, the people of Chang'an themselves. You notice their clothes are different. Not everyone is in the loose, traditional robes you are accustomed to. Something new is in the air, a different silhouette. Historians to this day still debate the exact population of Chang'an, arguing whether the famous 1 million figure referred only to the inhabitants within those massive walls, or if it included the sprawling suburbs and satellite towns. The scale is simply hard for us to comprehend, a city meticulously planned to house an empire's worth of dreams. As you take your first tentative steps into this overwhelming world, you cannot help but feel a thrill of anticipation. You came here seeking opportunity, or perhaps just to witness the legend. But you get the feeling you are about to find much more than that. That thrill of anticipation needs a direction. A city this large can swallow you whole if you just stand and stare. You need a destination, a focal point. You recall the advice from a seasoned merchant you shared a campfire with a week ago, If you want to feel the heartbeat of the empire, go to the East Market. But if you want to see the world, you must go to the West Market. The West Market, he had said, was where the Silk Road did not just end, but exploded into 1,000 different sights and sounds. You flag down a passing city resident, a man carrying a basket of fresh greens, and ask for the way. He points you west, down the Grand Avenue, and tells you to look for the busiest, loudest walled square you can imagine. You cannot miss it, he chuckles. He was right. As you approach, the controlled hum of the main avenues gives way to a rising tide of noise. You see the towering walls of the market ward, but unlike the residential wards, this one seems to be vibrating with energy. The entrance is a floodgate of humanity. You take a breath and plunge in, letting the current carry you. The moment you are inside, it is a total sensory assault. The air is a thick perfume of foreign incense, roasting meats, fermenting wine, and the musky scent of camels. It is crowded, a chaotic dance of shoppers, porters carrying heavy loads, and merchants shouting their wares in a dozen languages. The orderly, tree-lined avenues of the city feel a world away. This place is pure, unadulterated commerce. Your eyes dart everywhere, trying to take it all in. You see a Sogdian merchant with a magnificent beard, his blue eyes twinkling as he holds up a piece of translucent glassware, claiming it changes color in the light. Next to him, a Persian reader has carpets laid out, their intricate patterns telling stories of faraway lands. There are stalls piled high with spices you have only ever heard of in whispers, mounds of black pepper, fragrant cinnamon sticks, and fiery red powders that make your eyes water from a distance. You see jugglers, fortune tellers, and even a man with a monkey on his shoulder that will supposedly pick a lucky scroll for you. This was the great international hub, the place where goods from as far as the Byzantine Empire found their final customers. A historical point is the city's dual market system. The East Market primarily served the high-ranking officials and aristocrats who lived nearby, dealing in domestic luxury goods. The West Market, where you are now, was for the common people and, crucially, for the foreign merchants. It was the empire's window to the world. As you navigate the packed alleyways, you realize it is not entirely chaos. There is a method to the madness. The market is divided into specialized rows or hang. You stumble down one lane that deals exclusively in silk, with bolts of every imaginable color stacked to the rafters. You turn a corner and find yourself in the street of the harness makers, the air filled with the smell of fresh leather. And here is a fascinating little detail amidst all these exotic treasures. Some of the most popular stalls sold food. You see a baker with a clay oven, pulling out sizzling hot, round flatbreads covered in sesame seeds. He calls them hubbing or foreign cakes. They are the perfect street food, and everyone from porters to officials' aides seems to be munching on one. You stop to watch a group of Turkic-looking men inspecting a horse, their conversation sharp and loud. They wear tight-fitting tunics, trousers, and soft leather boots, nothing like the flowing robes you and most of the Han people around you are wearing. Their hair is long, sometimes braided, and their faces are weathered from the sun and wind of the steppes. You wonder what their lives are like. You wonder if they live here in this ward, if they go home to families after the market gates are locked at dusk. Historians are still piecing together the lives of these foreign communities. It is a subject of ongoing debate how integrated they truly were, whether they were a permanent, settled part of Chang'an, with their own temples, graveyards, and social structures, or if they were more like a transient population of long-stay business travelers, forever tied to the caravan cycles. The term the locals use for all these people, Huron or Hu people, is a catch-all, lumping together dozens of distinct cultures. Looking at them now, you see not a monolith, but a mosaic of different peoples, all drawn here by the magnetic pull of the Tang Empire's wealth. As you buy one of those hot sesame cakes, the aroma filling your senses, you look down at your own simple, slightly clumsy robe and then back at the practical, sharp outfits of the merchants. An idea begins to form in your mind. To truly experience this world, maybe you need to do more than just watch it. Maybe you need to look the part. Munching on that hot, savory hubbing, you find yourself staring. It is no longer a casual glance. You are actively studying the people around you. Your own robe, The one that felt perfectly normal your entire life suddenly feels cumbersome. The sleeves are wide and flowing, a sign of a scholar or a gentleman who does not need to perform manual labor. But here, in the crush of the West Market, you have to consciously hold them back to avoid knocking over a stack of pottery or dipping them into a vat of pickles. You see a man wearing a similar robe try to pay a merchant, and it is a delicate operation fishing for his coin pouch from within layers of fabric. Then, your eyes land on a young man swaggering past. He is clearly Han Chinese, his features and accent unmistakably local, but his attire is from another world. He is wearing what you now recognize as the same style as the Turkic horse traders. This is Hufu, Hu clothing. The name itself is a generalization, a catch-all term the Tang used for the styles of the various peoples to the north and west. Sogdians, Persians, Turks, and more. But here in Chang'an, it means one thing: fashion. You begin to deconstruct the look, piece by piece. The centerpiece is the robe, but it is short, barely reaching the mid-thigh. It has a lapel collar often opening to the left, and is cinched tight at the waist with a belt. But the most radical feature is the sleeves. They are narrow, form-fitting, ending neatly at the wrist. To you, whose entire wardrobe consists of sleeves you could hide a small dog in, this is a revelation. It speaks of action, of purpose. Below the robe, he wears trousers. Not the loose, almost skirt-like trousers hidden under traditional long robes, but proper tailored pants that are tucked snugly into a pair of dark leather boots. The entire silhouette is sharp, clean, and practical. The man moves with a different kind of energy. He is not gliding, he is striding. This practicality is a key historical point. Traditional Chinese hanfu was designed for a sedentary, hierarchical society. Its flowing lines were elegant for court ceremonies, painting, and leisurely strolls. Hufu, on the other hand, was born from the nomadic, equestrian cultures of the steppes. It was clothing designed for riding horses, for hunting, for fighting, for a life of constant movement. Its adoption in Chang'an was not just a fashion statement, it was a lifestyle choice. It was the 8th century equivalent of choosing sleek, modern activewear over a formal, three-piece suit. And here is a little niche detail for you. The sheer convenience of it all was a massive selling point. With Hufu, you could hop on a horse, run to catch a friend across the market, or even engage in a bit of street-side arm wrestling without your clothes getting in the way. For the residents of a bustling, energetic city, it just made sense. People were busy. They had places to be. The slow, deliberate grace required by traditional robes was starting to feel a little outdated, a bit like trying to navigate a modern city on a horse-drawn chariot. But as you look around, you see variations. Some tunics are plain, made of sturdy wool or cotton. Others are of vibrant silk, embroidered with swirling floral patterns or animal motifs that look distinctly Persian. Some colors are round, others are V-necked. This leads to a question that historians still actively debate: whether Hufu was a specific, imported style from a single culture, or if it was a creative fusion, a greatest hits of Silk Road fashion curated and popularized by the tastemakers of Chang'an. Some scholars meticulously trace the origins of the lapel to Sasanian Persia and the trousers to the Turkic peoples, while others argue that the version seen in Chang'an was its own unique invention, a hybrid that incorporated various foreign elements into a new, distinctly Tang Metropolitan style. It probably was not as simple as just copying one outfit. It was more like taking the best ideas, the comfortable boots from one group, the stylish tunic from another, and blending them into something new and exciting. You look down at your own clothes again. The wide sleeves, the long hem that threatens to trip you if you take a step too quickly. You suddenly feel old-fashioned, like a visitor from the past. That initial thought, that vague idea you had while watching the horse traders, has now crystallized into a firm decision. You are in the most modern city in the world. It is time to look the part. You finish the last bite of your sesame cake, dust the crumbs from your hands, and begin to scan the market stalls not as a tourist but as a customer. You are going to buy a new outfit. Your mission is set. You are now a man on a quest for a new wardrobe. But where to begin? This is not like buying a turnip. You cannot just point and pay. This is about identity. You wander past stalls selling glittering jewelry and fragrant perfumes, your eyes fixed on the clothing merchants. You feel a little self-conscious, like a country cousin who has just stumbled into the big city for the first time, which, to be fair, is exactly what you are. You see groups of young men, their hair stylishly arranged, laughing as they browse silks, and you feel a pang of intimidation. Finally, you find a stall that seems a bit more approachable. It is run by a stout, friendly-looking man who gives you a warm, business-like smile. His shop is a riot of color and texture. Tunics of all shades hang from wooden poles, and trousers are folded in neat stacks. You hesitate at the entrance, and the shopkeeper, sensing a potential customer, steps forward. He asks if you are looking for something a little more practical, sir, his eyes flicking down to your cumbersome robe. You nod, feeling your cheeks flush slightly. You stammer that you are looking for something for riding, though you have not been on a horse in weeks. He grins knowingly. Ah, the QKUA bell. A fine choice. A man needs to be able to move. He ushers you in, pulling a tunic from the display. This is it. The QKUA power robe with the missing crotch piece is the quintessential piece of men's hufu. Its name sounds a bit strange, but it refers to a very practical design. The robe is short, as you have observed, but its key feature is that the front and back panels are not fully sewn together down the sides. Instead, they are left open from the hip downwards, creating large slits. This is the core historical element. These slits were an equestrian innovation. When you sat on a horse, the front and back panels would drape neatly over the animal's back and your thighs, giving you complete freedom of movement without a bunch of fabric getting in your way. It was the perfect blend of a robe's coverage and a jacket's mobility. The shopkeeper hands you one. The fabric is a sturdy, dark blue cotton, practical and unpretentious. A starter piece, he says. Cannot go wrong with this. He then points to a pair of matching trousers. They are simple, drawstring-waisted, and designed to be tucked into boots. He shoos you behind a curtain into a small, makeshift changing area. As you pull off your old robe, it feels heavy and restrictive. You slip on the new tunic. It is immediately different. The narrow sleeves feel snug but not tight. You can move your arms freely without a sea of fabric following every gesture. You tie the belt, cinching it at your waist, and suddenly you have a shape. You are no longer a walking bell. You have shoulders, a torso, and legs. You pull on the trousers, and the feeling of freedom is even more pronounced. And here is a quirky little detail that might surprise you. While the look was foreign, the materials were often the local fusion. Many of these foreign-style clothes sold in the markets were still made from quintessentially Chinese materials, especially silk. You might have a tunic cut in a Persian style, but woven from the finest silk produced just a few provinces away. So while you are adopting an exotic look, you are still wrapped in the luxury of the Tang Empire. It was a perfect marriage of foreign style and domestic substance. You step out from behind the curtain. The shopkeeper gives an approving nod. See, a new man, ready for anything the city throws at you. He gestures for you to take a few steps to swing your arms. You do, and it is liberating. You could actually run in this outfit. You could jump. The difference is astounding. It feels like you have shed a skin, but then comes the moment of truth, the price. You haggle a bit, as is expected, your heart pounding. You wonder if this is an indulgence, a waste of good money. But then you think of the feeling of mobility, of fitting in, of looking like you belong in this vibrant modern world. The debate among historians here is not about the clothes themselves, but about the motivation, about to what extent this fashion choice was driven by pure pragmatism versus a conscious desire to appear cosmopolitan and exotic. It is about whether the average man who bought a QKUA POW was thinking, this will make riding my donkey to work easier, or if he was thinking, this makes me look like those cool Sogdian merchants from the West. The answer is likely a complex mix of both. For you, standing there in the bustling market, it is certainly a bit of both. It feels incredibly practical, but there is no denying the thrill of looking like you are part of the in crowd. You pay the man, your coin pouch feeling significantly lighter, but your spirit soaring. You leave your old robe with him. He says he can sell it to a theater troupe or a conservative scholar, and you step back out into the market, a new man in a new city, your first set of hufu. The journey has truly begun. You walk away from the stall, your stride longer, more confident. The slight breeze of the marketplace actually moves between your legs now, a novel sensation after a lifetime of being shrouded in a single column of fabric. You feel a strange and satisfying connection to the ground, your movements precise rather than suggestive. You catch your reflection in a polished bronze mirror hanging outside a vendor's stall, and for a second, you do not recognize yourself. The man looking back seems more alert, more capable, a true resident of this energetic metropolis. You feel an almost comical urge to find something to leap over, just because you can. Holding that impulse in check, you turn your attention back to the river of humanity around you. And with your new fashion-forward eyes, you start to notice more. You are not the only one who has embraced this style. But it is not the other men who catch your eye. It is the women. A group of them pass by, their laughter bright and unrestrained. They are not wearing the flowing, floor-length dresses and delicate slippers you would expect. Instead, they are dressed in outfits that look startlingly similar to your own. They wear vibrant, thigh-length tunics in shades of emerald and crimson, cinched at the waist with ornate belts. They have on trousers, and their hair is not elaborately pinned in the traditional style, but tied up high, almost like a men's top knot, or in some cases, tucked under a stylish cap. Then you see it, a sight that stops you in your tracks. A young woman is confidently riding a horse, not side saddle as tradition dictates for any respectable lady, but astride just like a man. Her posture is impeccable. She handles the reins with an easy authority. She is wearing a fitted, lapel-lead robe of brilliant yellow silk, slim trousers, and dark boots. She looks powerful, free, and utterly in control. In your home village, a woman seen in such attire, riding in such a manner, would be the subject of scandalized whispers for a month. Here in Chang'an, people barely give her a second glance. It is normal. This is a defining historical feature of the High Tang era, the remarkable freedom and visibility of elite women. It was not just a matter of clothing, it was a complete cultural shift. Women, especially those from aristocratic families, were not confined to the inner quarters of their homes. They were active participants in public life. They rode horses, composed poetry, ran businesses, and famously, they played polo. You can just imagine the scene: a dusty field, teams of women on swift ponies, mallets swinging as they gallop furiously towards the goal, their colorful tunics and trousers a blur of motion. It was a physically demanding, often dangerous sport, and the fact that women played it at the highest levels speaks volumes about their status. The daughters of emperors were known to be fierce competitors. This fashion was not just for show. It was essential for the active lifestyle these women lead. As you continue to watch the women of Chang'an, you notice a specific accessory. Many of them, even those on foot, wear a particular kind of hat. It is a wide-brimmed hat from which hangs a veil of semi-transparent black or purple gauze that drapes down to the shoulders. It is called a ima or curtain hat. This is a fascinating bit of sartorial history. It was a descendant of an earlier, more concealing piece of headwear from the frontier, but it had been adapted for city life. The gauze veil offered protection from the dust and the sun's glare, and it also provided a tantalizing sense of modesty and mystery without completely obscuring the woman's face or her fashionable makeup. You could see the world, and the world could get a glimpse of you. It was the perfect blend of public presence and personal privacy, an accessory that was both practical and deeply chic. Seeing these women, so confident and so stylishly dressed in what was technically men's clothing from foreign lands, sparks a question in your mind. Historians and scholars have been debating why this happened for centuries. Was this a conscious act of female empowerment, a way for women to symbolically claim the freedom and mobility that came with male attire? Was it a form of rebellion against the strict Confucian ideals that sought to keep them hidden away? Or was it simply the height of fashion, driven by a court culture that admired the exotic and the novel? Perhaps imperial princesses started wearing it because it was exciting and new, and everyone else followed suit. The way trends always trickle down from the top. There is likely no single answer. It was probably a mix of all these things. a genuine desire for the practical freedom the clothes offered, combined with the undeniable thrill of being on the cutting edge of a daring new trend. You watch the horsewoman disappear into the crowd, a fleeting image of grace and power. Your own small act of changing your robe suddenly feels less significant, a mere ripple in a tidal wave of social and stylistic change. You thought you were being modern, but you see now that the women of this city are the ones truly pushing the boundaries. They have taken a foreign masculine style and made it entirely their own, redefining what it means to be a woman in the Tang Dynasty. You look down at your own new outfit. You might be dressed for action, but you have a feeling you are going to have to run to keep up. That feeling of keeping up is now a very literal physical challenge. You stride through the market in your new, efficient tunic and trousers, but with every step there is a discordant sound. C-L-O-M-P, clack, C-L-O-M-P. The source of this clumsy rhythm is your own feet. You look down at your footwear. You are wearing a pair of traditional G, wooden clogs with a raised base, designed to keep the hem of your old, long robe out of the mud and dust. They are perfectly functional for a slow, dignified shuffle across a clean courtyard. But for navigating the crowded, uneven flagstones of the West Market, they are a disaster. They are heavy, they have no flexibility, and they announce your every move with an ungainly clatter. You almost trip on a loose stone, catching yourself just in time. The agility your new clothes have given your upper body is being completely betrayed by your feet. You see it now. It is a total system, a package deal. The men and women striding past you with such easy confidence are not wearing clogs. They are wearing boots. Soft, pliable boots that seem to hug their feet, making their steps silent and sure-footed. Your wooden clogs suddenly feel like anchors, chaining you to an older, slower world. The decision is made almost unconsciously. The transformation is not yet complete. You scan the market again, this time looking for leather goods, for the telltale signs of a bootmaker. You follow a scent of tanned hides and beeswax down a narrower alley and find it. The stall is less colorful than the silk merchants, more elemental. It is a shop of browns, blacks, and grays. Dozens of pairs of boots are displayed, some hanging by loops from a high beam, others arranged in neat rows on low shelves. The shopkeeper is a man with powerful hands and a leather apron, his face weathered into a permanent squint of concentration as he stitches a sole. He looks up as you approach, his eyes immediately falling to your feet. He does not even need to ask what you are looking for. Your clogs have already announced it for him. He gestures to a low stool. Tired of making a racket, he asks with a dry smile. You sit, feeling a little sheepish, and he expertly measures your foot with a piece of marked string. He grunts and turns to his shelves, pulling down a pair of simple, black leather boots. These are who's who boots, the footwear of choice for the fashionable and the practical. This is the established history. The adoption of soft boots was one of the most significant and lasting impacts of Hu culture on Tang China. Unlike the rigid wooden clog or the flimsy fabric slipper, these boots, typically made of deer skin or cow skin, were designed for the harsh environment of the steppes. Their soft soles allowed a rider to feel the stirrups, and they provided protection and warmth without sacrificing mobility. For a city dweller in Chang'an, they offered a revolutionary level of comfort and quietness. The bootmaker hands you one. It is surprisingly light. You take off your heavy clog and slip your foot in. The sensation is immediate. The soft, oiled leather envelops your foot like a thick sash. It is snug, but not tight. You pull on the other one and stand up. You take a step, and instead of a loud clack, there is only a soft, muffled thud. You take another. You can feel the texture of the woven mat beneath your feet through the sole. You roll your ankle, flex your toes. The boot moves with you. It feels like an extension of your own body. And here's a quirky little detail about these boots. They became status symbols that could be customized to an incredible degree. While your plain black pair is for a man of modest means, the bootmaker, seeing your interest, points to another pair on the shelf. The leg shafts of these boots are covered in shimmering silk brocade, embroidered with golden thread in a swirling phoenix pattern. For a general's son, he says, he wants to look sharp at the polo match. So a practical item born of nomadic necessity had been transformed into a canvas for luxury and ostentatious display in the capital. The wealthiest residents would have boots for different occasions and different colors and materials, just as we have different shoes today. You walk a small circle inside the shop, marveling at the freedom. This simple change has fundamentally altered your relationship with the ground you walk on. It makes you wonder about the people who first brought this style here. This leads to the ongoing academic discussion of whether the widespread option of boots was a purely utilitarian choice, or if it was a powerful social statement. Some historians argue it was all about pragmatism. Boots were just objectively better for urban and equestrian life. Others contend that wearing boots was a conscious signal of one's identity. It could mark you as a man of the world, someone connected to the military, to horses, and to the vibrant, powerful cultures of the Silk Road. It was a way of saying, I am not a sheltered scholar. I am a man of action. In all likelihood, for you and for thousands of others, it was both. They just worked better, and they made you look cool. You pay the bootmaker, leaving your wooden clogs behind without a shred of sentimentality. They lie on the floor of the shop looking like artifacts from a forgotten age. You step back out into the cacophony of the West Market, but this time you add nothing to it. Your footsteps are silent, sure, and swift. You are grounded, connected, and ready to move. Your transformation from the ground up is nearly complete. You are a new man, from the ankles up at least. Your silent boots carry you through the market with a newfound grace, and your tunic allows you to weave through the throngs without a second thought. You feel sleek, modern, efficient, yet something still feels incomplete. You run a hand over your hair. It is styled in the simple, practical top knot of a common traveler, a swirl of dark hair held in place with a modest pin. It is neat, but it is plain. You look at the men around you, the ones who seem to truly belong to this city, and you see that their heads are as much a part of their fashion statement as their clothes. Your bare head suddenly feels naked, unfinished. The final piece of the puzzle is missing. You need a hat. Your search leads you to a hatter's stall, a place that seems to cater to every conceivable head shape and social aspiration. The variety is dizzying. There are stiff, formal caps for scholars and officials, humble cloth coverings for laborers, and then there is the dominant style, the king of all headwear in Chang'an, the futi-ou. At its core, the futi-ou is a surprisingly simple concept. The main historical point here is its evolution. It started centuries earlier as a mere piece of black cloth, a sort of bandana or turban that men would wrap around their heads to keep their hair in order. But by the time you have arrived in the Tang Dynasty, it has transformed into a more structured piece of headwear, a kind of skull cap with 2 legs or feet, jiaoi, extending from the back. These were long ribbons of stiffened fabric that provided the hat with its signature look. The shopkeeper, a man with a perpetually raised eyebrow as if he is sizing up every owner's social standing, gestures to his main display. A gentleman needs a proper futi-ou, he declares. He shows you the most popular style of the day. The cap part is soft silk, fitting snugly to the head, and the 2 legs that extend from the back are long, soft, and drooping. They hang down the back with a kind of elegant nonchalance. This was the high fashion of the era, a relaxed and confident style compared to the stiffer, more wing-like legs that would become popular in later dynasties. You see men all around you wearing the style, the soft legs gently swaying as they walk. But then your eyes are drawn to the other, more exotic options on display. This is where the direct influence of the Hu people is most obvious. Here is a quirky little detail for you. Not all hats were black silk. You see a pointed cap made of thick, dark felt, trimmed with fur. The shopkeeper calls it a pili hat, a style directly borrowed from the Turkic tribesmen of the steppes. It is the kind of hat a warrior or a hunter would wear, designed for warmth and durability. Next to it is another, a soft, rounded cap made of brocade, with no legs at all, much like the ones you saw on some Sogdian merchants. Wearing one of these was a much bolder statement. A futi-ou was Tang fashion with a foreign accent. A pili hat was a full declaration of international taste. Some were even made from leopard skin, an audacious choice for only the most daring and wealthy young dandies who wanted to cultivate a fierce, martial image. You touch the soft silk of a standard futi-ou, then glance at the rugged felt of the pili. This choice highlights a debate that still engages historians regarding the degree to which these clothing choices were regulated. The Tang Dynasty, like those before it, had extensive some PTU laws, detailed regulations specifying what materials, colors, and styles could be worn by different ranks of society. In theory, a commoner like you should not be wearing certain types of silk or ornamentation reserved for officials or nobility. Yet, here in the West Market, everything seems to be for sale to anyone with enough cash. Historians debate whether these laws were strictly enforced, or if they were more like guidelines that were largely ignored in the freewheeling, commercial atmosphere of the capital, especially when it came to these trendy styles. The consensus is leaning towards a great deal of leniency, at least during the peak of the dynasty's power. Fashion, it seems, was a force stronger than bureaucracy. You decide to thread the needle. You are not a Turkic warrior, nor are you a high-ranking official. You are a man of today, a man of Chang'an. You choose a classic, elegant futi-ou. It is made of fine black silk, and the soft, drooping legs are the perfect length, fashionable, but not ostentatious. The shopkeeper helps you put it on, arranging it just so. He holds up a polished bronze mirror for your inspection. The man in the reflection is a stranger. From the silent leather boots to the practical trousers, to the smart, belted tunic, and now to the stylish futi-ou that completes the silhouette, the transformation is total. The country traveler is gone. In his place is a resident of the greatest city on earth. You are no longer just visiting Chang'an. You are wearing it. You pay the hatter, give him a slight, confident nod, and turn away from the stall. You melt back into the crowd, no longer an observer, but a part of the vibrant, stylish, and endlessly fascinating tapestry of the city. You are a complete picture now, a walking, breathing embodiment of Chang'an high fashion. You move with a quiet confidence that was unthinkable just a few hours ago in your clunky clogs and cumbersome robe. You decide to celebrate this transformation with a small purchase, perhaps a finely crafted comb or a tasty sweetmeat from a nearby vendor. You reach for your coin pouch and you stop. In your old robe, you would have tucked it safely deep within the cavernous folds of your sleeve or against your chest. But this sleek new tunic has no such hiding places. You have got it tucked uncomfortably into your trousers, creating an awkward bulge. You feel a flash of annoyance. You have solved the problem of movement, but you have created a new one, storage. Your hands are no longer encumbered by flowing sleeves, but now they might have to be filled with the things you need to carry. You look around, once again studying the people who wear this style with such native ease. You focus on their waists. The man you bought your tunic from gave you a simple cloth sash to tie it shut, but you notice that the truly stylish men have something far more substantial. They are wearing leather belts, and these belts are doing more than just holding up their trousers. Things are hanging from them. You approach a man who is haggling for a piece of jade and you get a closer look. His belt is made of dark, polished leather, studded with ornate silver plaques, and from the belt hang several short leather straps, each ending in a small hook or loop. On these straps, he carries his life. You see a small, embroidered pouch for his money, a sheath for a personal knife, a lacquered case that probably holds a whetstone, and even a small, delicate brush for dusting his hat. It is all there, organized and within easy reach, leaving his hands completely free. This is not just a belt, it is a piece of personal equipment. This, you realize, is the famous Dai belt. The history of this accessory is a perfect example of cultural borrowing. The Dai belt was a direct import from the nomadic peoples of the northern steppes. For a horseman who spent most of his life in the saddle, having essential tools accessible on his person was a matter of survival. He needed his fire starter, his knife, his tools, all right there at his waist. The Tang Empire, with its massive cavalry and constant interaction with these nomadic groups, recognized the sheer utility of the design and adopted it, first for the military, and then, inevitably, for civilian fashion. It was the original hands-free device. Intrigued, you find a stall run by a leather worker who specializes in these belts. The air smells richly of heidened oil. He has belts of every quality, from simple and decorated leather straps to magnificent creations adorned with jade and gold. He explains the construction to you. The main belt is punctuated by a series of metal or jade plaques called daikua. From these plaques hang the little secondary straps, the dai band, where you attach your gear. And here is a wonderfully specific, quirky detail. The sheer variety of items people would hang was immense. You might see a scholar with a case for his personal seal and a tiny water dropper for his inkstone. A soldier might have a sharpening steel and a bowman's thumb ring. Aide Andy about town might have a pair of tweezers and an ear pick in a silver case for personal grooming. The belt was a miniature, wearable biography, telling the world who you were and what you did. Of course, in a society as status-conscious as the Tang, nothing is ever that simple. This brings us to a major point of discussion for historians and archaeologists. The Tang court had strict Sun Pt laws that dictated exactly who could wear what. The number and material of the plaques on your dais belt were legally regulated to signify your rank in the government bureaucracy. For example, a high-ranking official of the 3rd grade or above was entitled to a belt with jade plaques. Lower ranks were permitted gold, silver, bronze, and finally iron. The question is, how strictly were these laws enforced on the general populace, especially rich merchants who had no official rank but plenty of money? Historians debate if a wealthy silk trader dared to wear a belt with silver plaques, technically reserved for a mid-level government official, and if he was trying to buy a little respectability, or if he was risking a fine or worse for impersonating a man of rank. Evidence from tombs suggests that many people pushed these boundaries, wearing belts far fancier than their station would strictly allow. It was a subtle and risky game of social climbing, played out on the leather stage of a man's waist. You, being a man of sense and modest means, have no desire to end up in trouble with the city watch. You choose a sturdy but handsome belt. It is made of good, strong leather with 7 simple, polished bronze plaques. Functional, stylish, but not challenging any laws. The leather worker helps you fit it, and you carefully transfer your coin pouch to one of the hanging straps. It feels secure, resting lightly against your hip. You take a few steps. The feeling is one of completion. Your hands are free. Your belongings are secure. Your silhouette is perfect. Your outfit is no longer just a collection of fashionable items. It is a fully integrated system for living. You are now truly equipped for life in Chang'an. The world feels different. Or rather, your way of moving through it does. Each silent, sure-footed step you take is a small affirmation of your new identity. You are no longer an outsider looking in. You are part of the city as kinetic energy. Your simple, dark blue tunic feels like a uniform of belonging. You feel anonymous in the best possible way, just another face in the stylish crowd. But then, as you pause to let a train of camels pass, someone walks by who makes you question everything all over again. He is a young nobleman. You guess by the confident, almost insolent way he carries himself. He is wearing hufu, the same basic silhouette as you are. Thigh-length tunic, trousers, boots. But that is where the similarity ends. Your tunic is a single, solid color. His is a symphony. The fabric is a lustrous, deep crimson silk, and it is covered in a repeating pattern of dazzling, stylized birds. They are parrots, you think, arranged in pairs, facing each other inside a perfect circle made of what looks like a string of tiny, woven pearls. The colors are electric. The birds have plumage of emerald green and sapphire blue. Their beaks a speck of gold. The entire garment seems to hum with vibrancy. He is a peacock, and next to him you suddenly feel like a common sparrow. You look around and start to see it everywhere. You had been so focused on the cut of the clothing that you had missed a whole other language being spoken, the language of color and pattern. Traditional Han clothing, for centuries, had favored subtlety, single colors, and symbolic embroidery that was often personal or hidden. What you are seeing now is something else entirely. This is bold, graphic, and meant to be seen from a distance. The main historical point here is the massive influx of Central Asian and Persian textile aesthetics via the Silk Road. The Sasanian Empire in Persia, in particular, was famous for its luxurious silks featuring symmetrical animal designs within pearl-bordered roundels, just like the one on the nobleman's tunic. These motifs, whether they depicted ducks, boars, stags, or winged lions, became the absolute height of sophisticated, exotic fashion in Tang China. To wear Sasanian patterned silk was to wear your worldliness on your sleeve. Drawn by this new fascination, you find your way to a high-end silk merchant in the West Market. This is not a simple stall. It is a proper shop, open-fronted and hung with bolts of fabric that cascade down like a waterfall of jewels. The richness of the colors is overwhelming. There are deep indigos, fiery saffroness, brilliant malachite greens, and soft lilac purples. The merchant, a slender man with discerning eyes, sees you admiring a bolt of shimmering gold-colored silk patterned with confronting lions. He asks smoothly if you have a taste for the exotic. He pulls the bolt down with a flourish, letting the light catch the intricate weave. A fine Sogdian and design. Very popular with the military men. They like the symbolism of strength. He then shows you another, a deep blue fabric with a repeating pattern of grapevines and wine cups, a clear nod to the wind-drinking cultures of the West. And that is when you spot it, tucked away in a special alcove as if it is too precious for the open air. It is a piece of silk in a shade of blue, so deep and pure it almost hurts to look at. It has no pattern, just the raw, unadulterated power of its color. Here is a wonderfully niche piece of knowledge for your journey. Not all colors were created equal. The merchant sees where your gaze has landed, and his expression becomes almost reverent. "Ah," he says softly, "the color of the heavens." He explains that this is not dyed with common indigo. The pigment used to create this particular blue is ground lapis lazuli, a semi-precious stone mined in the mountains of faraway Afghanistan. It is fantastically expensive, worth more than its weight in gold. To wear a robe of this color was the ultimate statement of wealth, a quiet declaration that you could afford to wear crushed gemstones. This revelation opens a door to a complicated question that historians still puzzle over. What did these patterns and colors mean to the people of Chang'an? When a Tang nobleman wore a tunic with Sasanian lions and pearl roundels, was he consciously referencing the royal symbolism of the Sasanian court? Did he know that a particular floral motif was associated with a Zoroastrian deity? Or was it all just appealingly exotic decoration, stripped of its original context and meaning? Some scholars argue for a deep conscious adoption of foreign symbolism, suggesting that the well-educated elite would have understood the references. Others claim it was purely aesthetic. The patterns were simply beautiful, novel, and fashionable, their original significance lost in translation. As you listen to the merchant, you can imagine two scholars standing right here, having that very debate, one insisting on the deep semiotic transfer, the other dismissing it as mere fashionable nonsense. You look from the impossibly blue silk back to your own simple, functional tunic. You realize that you have only taken the first step into this new world. You have mastered the grammar of the Hufu silhouette, but you are only now beginning to discover the rich, complex, and fantastically expensive poetry written on the surface of the fabrics. To be truly fashionable in Chang'an, it seems, it was not enough to have the right shape. You also had to tell the right story in the right color. You leave the silk merchant's shop with your head spinning, not from the haggling, but from the sheer sensory overload. The world of fabrics, you now understand, is as complex as court politics. You touch the sleeve of your sturdy cotton tunic. It is honest, it is practical, but it is not art. As you wander deeper into the market's labyrinthine alleys, you begin to pay more attention to the very stuff of the clothes themselves, the feel and weight of them, the way they fall. You pass a group of officials' aides, their tunics made of a stiff, slightly shiny material that rustles when they move. You see a woman bargaining for pomegranate, her wide sleeves made of a gauze so fine it is almost transparent, her skin visible underneath like a peach behind a morning mist. Then you see a man leading a camel. He is clearly from the far west. His tunic is wool, thick and rugged, but around his collar and cuffs there is a trim of soft, dark fur. It is a small detail, but it speaks of cold nights and a different way of life. This is the next layer of the fashion world you have entered. It is not just about the cut and the color, it is about the material itself. The great historical truth of the Tang Dynasty is that it was a master of textiles, particularly silk. The empire was the world's leading producer of the most coveted fabric on earth, and the government even collected taxes in the form of silk bolts. It was a currency, a status symbol, and an art form all in one. But what made the Hu trend so interesting was that it forced a collision of different textile traditions. You find yourself drawn to a tailor's workshop where a master craftsman is working on a custom garment. He is not making a simple tunic like yours. This is a high-fashion item, a winter robe for a wealthy client. The body of the robe is made from thick, deep brown wool, a material favored by the nomadic peoples for its warmth and durability. But the tailor is not sewing a wool collar onto it. Instead, he is painstakingly attaching a wide, opulent collar made of shimmering silk brocade, the very kind you saw in the last shop, patterned with little dancing horses. The cuffs are getting the same treatment. The final garment will be a hybrid, the warmth and ruggedness of the steppes combined with the luxurious, artistic silk of the Central Plains. It is a fusion, a conversation between two cultures happening in a single piece of clothing. And here is a quirky little detail for you, a tidbit that shows how deep this fusion went. The Tang elite became obsessed with a specific type of fabric called jian. This was a kind of woolen textile similar to felt or broadcloth that was imported from Persia and Central Asia. It was prized for its rich colors and its resistance to water. But what the Tang nobles loved most was its stiffness. It allowed for a sharper, more sculptural silhouette than soft silk could achieve. They would have jackets and tunics made from this foreign wool, perfectly tailored in the Hu style. So you have a Chinese nobleman in the Chinese capital, wearing a foreign-style tunic made from a foreign imported fabric to look fashionable. That is a level of cosmopolitanism that is truly astounding. It is like someone today insisting on having a suit made in an Italian cut, but only from genuine Scottish Harris weed. This blending of materials naturally leads to a question that art historians and textile specialists are still working on. Who was driving these innovations? Was it the customers demanding these specific combinations? Or was it the artisans and merchants themselves, experimenting with new combinations to create novel products that would catch the eye of wealthy patrons? Some scholars believe that the Sogdian merchants, who controlled so much of the Silk Road trade, were the great innovators. They would arrive in Chang'an with their Western textiles, observe the local aesthetic, and then commission hybrid garments from local workshops that they knew would appeal to the capital's taste for the exotic. They were not just salespeople, they were creative directors, curating a new, international look. You watched the tailor take a fine, sharp needle and make a few precise stitches, joining the lustrous silk to the thick wool. The seam is perfect and visible. He is not just sewing. He is mediating a cultural exchange. He is blending the agricultural wealth of the silk-producing South with the pastoral heritage of the nomadic North. The resulting garment will be warmer than a pure silk robe and infinitely more stylish than a simple woolen one. It is, in its own way, a perfect metaphor for the Tang Dynasty itself, a powerful core culture, confident enough to borrow the best ideas from the outside world and synthesize them into something new, vibrant, and utterly unique. You look down at your plain cotton tunic again. It keeps you decent, but it does not tell a story. The clothes of these people, you now realize, are full of them. Your transformation feels complete. You move like a local, you are equipped like a local, and you are dressed in the height of local fashion. You decide it is time to rest your feet and actually enjoy the city, not just as a student of its style, but as a resident. You find a small, open-air tea house tucked into a corner of the market, a place where people are sipping hot tea from simple earthenware bowls and gossiping. You sit on a wooden bench, finally allowing yourself a moment of quiet observation. From this vantage point, you can see people's faces more clearly, and just as your understanding of clothing underwent a revolution, your perception of beauty is about to be shattered. A young woman sits at a nearby table with her companion. You had noticed her earlier because of her fashionable boyish tunic, but now you see her face. It is a work of art. Her skin is powdered to a stark, almost theatrical white. Against this pale canvas, her eyebrows are drawn on with dramatic flair, not thin, delicate arches, but thick, dark shapes, almost like silkworms or willow leaves, giving her an expressive, slightly melancholical, but it is the color that truly shocks you. Two large, perfect crescents of deep red blush bloom high on her cheeks, so vibrant it looks like she is permanently, happily flushed from drinking wine. Her lips are painted a brilliant cherry red, but only in the center, forming a small, pouty shape. And on her forehead, right between her dramatic eyebrows, is a small, delicate, painted flower. You are looking at her Shaowang, or her makeup. This bold, colorful, and slightly artificial look was the absolute peak of fashion for the women of Chang'an, and it was a radical departure from the more natural and demure aesthetics of the past. This is the key historical point. Tang beauty standards, influenced by the wider world, celebrated vibrancy and health, even if that health had to be artistically applied. The heavy blush was known as Jiayu Yun Shaowang, the wind-dazed makeup, and it was meant to evoke a feeling of joyful, tipsy warmth. It was not about subtlety, it was about making a statement. As you look around, you start to see it everywhere, in endless variations. Some women have different forehead ornaments, or Huadayan, some look like tiny leaves, others like golden dots. Some have little painted dimples, called me NE at the corners of their mouths. And here is a truly fascinating and bizarre detail for you. The most daring fashionistas took this imitation of foreigners to its logical extreme with a style called Hishimian or ochre face. You see a woman who seems to be part of a very wealthy and daring entourage, and her face is not powdered white but is instead coated in a layer of reddish-brown pigment. This was a direct and conscious imitation of Tibetan women, who use stoker to protect their skin from the harsh sun and wind of the high plateau. For a woman in Chang'an to do this was the ultimate piece of cosmetic performance art. She was using makeup to temporarily adopt a different ethnicity, all in the name of being exotic and worldly. It would be like a high-fashion model today appearing on a runway with a fake, theatrical meant to evoke a specific culture. It was bold, it was weird, and it was undeniably who. This practice, of course, leads historians with a fascinating question. What was the driving force behind these seemingly unnatural makeup trends? Was it a form of feminist rebellion? By painting their faces with such artificial and bold designs, were women rejecting the Confucian ideal of natural, submissive beauty? Were they making themselves into works of art, claiming control over their own appearance in a very public way? Or was the influence more direct and less philosophical? Some scholars argue that these trends were directly imported. When foreign princesses, diplomats, and merchants came to Chang'an, they brought their wives and daughters, who had their own standards of beauty. The trend-setting women of the capital would have seen these exotic looks at court banquets and immediately sought to copy them. The Tibetan ochre face is a strong piece of evidence for this direct imitation theory. The debate continues: was it a general spirit of openness, or a specific mimicry of influential foreigners? You watch the woman with the wind-dazed cheeks laugh at something her friend said. Her whole face is an expression of confidence. She is not trying to hide or be demure. She is presenting a carefully constructed, beautiful, and vibrant mask to the world. It dawns on you that the Hu phenomenon was far more than just clothing. It was a total aesthetic that permeated every aspect of public life. It was not enough to wear a foreign-style tunic. You had to adopt a foreign-looking face to go with it. You have spent the day acquiring the uniform of a Chang'an man, but you see now that for the women of this city, the commitment to the cosmopolitan ideal was being painted, quite literally, onto their skin. It is a level of dedication to a trend that you find both admirable and slightly intimidating. Sipping your tea, you feel a sense of calm satisfaction settle over you. You have successfully navigated the bewildering world of Tang fashion and emerged on the other side, feeling like you finally fit in. You have mastered the look of the common city dweller. But as you watch a procession of decorated carriages clatter down the main avenue, you realize that there are levels to this game you cannot even begin to imagine. Your cotton tunic and bronze-buckled belt are fine for the West Market, but what does this trend look like in the halls of the powerful? You overhear two men at the next table, merchants by the sound of them, gossiping about a banquet held a few nights ago at the estate of a certain prince. Their voices are hushed, full of envy and dull. They speak of fountains that sprayed wine, of dancers from Samarkand, and of music that sounded like it was from another world. But what they keep coming back to is the attire. Every one of them whispers was dressed as a who, even the prince himself. The other man nods, adding that the princess wore a tight-fitting Persian robe of purple silk and rode a pony into the main hall to greet her guests. This is the essential historical context. The who craze was not a bottom-up street style that the upper classes eventually adopted. It was the other way around. The Tang imperial court and the aristocracy were the ultimate trendsetters. The royal family itself, the Li clan, had mixed heritage with ancestral ties to the Xiongbi, a northern nomadic people. They had a natural affinity for equestrian culture and a worldly outlook. Emperor Taizong, one of the dynasty's founders, was famously comfortable with foreign customs and employed officials from all over Asia. This imperial open-mindedness set the tone for the entire elite class. For a nobleman in Chang'an, showing off your knowledge and appreciation of foreign cultures was not just a hobby, it was a way of demonstrating your sophistication and your alignment with the cosmopolitan spirit of the imperial court. And so they threw parties, not just banquets but full-blown themed events. Imagine receiving an invitation to a feast at a powerful duke's mansion. The instructions might specify who attire required. You would not just show up in your everyday tunic. You would commission a special outfit. You would wear a Sasanian-style robe made of silk woven with gold thread. Your belt would be inlaid with jade. You would wear a tall, pointed felt cap. And at the party you would not be sitting on mats in the traditional style. You would be sitting on low couches or folding stools, another import from the West. Instead of sipping rice wine from small cups, you would be drinking grape wine, a foreign delicacy, from silver, long-stemmed goblets of Persian design. The music would not be the slow, ceremonial clang of bells and chimes, but the fast, rhythmic thrumming of the beep and the beat of a hand drum playing tunes from Kucha on the Silk Road. Here is a specific, slightly decadent detail for you. These parties often featured wine pouring who, young boys or girls, sometimes actual foreigners, sometimes locals dressed up, whose job was to serve the exotic grape wine to the guests. Archaeologists have found numerous tomb figurines depicting these young curly-haired, non-Han attendants, forever frozen in the act of pouring wine at an aristocratic feast. It shows that the fascination with the who was so complete that it extended even to the serving staff, turning the entire event into a piece of immersive theater. Of course, this elite obsession raises a compelling question that historians love to debate. Was this all just frivolous, decadent fun, the ancient equivalent of a modern-day costume party? Or did it have a deeper political meaning? Some scholars argue that by publicly and enthusiastically embracing the clothing, music, and customs of the foreign peoples under their rule on their borders, the Tang aristocracy was performing a kind of soft power. They were demonstrating the empire's cultural dominance, showing that it was so confident and so powerful that it could absorb and enjoy the cultures of others without feeling threatened. It was a political statement that said all the world comes to us, and we find it delightful. Others take a more cynical view, suggesting it was merely a form of exoticist, a way for the jaded and fabulously wealthy to stave off boredom with ever more novel and exciting amusements, with little genuine appreciation for the cultures they were borrowing from. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in the middle. You finish your tea, the merchant's story still echoing in your mind. Your own fashion transformation feels small and personal now. For you, it was about fitting in and feeling practical. For the princes and princesses in their walled estates, it was a performance on a grand scale, a game of luxury, politics, and power, played with silk, wine, and music from 1,000 miles away. You look down at your simple boots. They are perfect for walking the streets of Chang'an, but you now know there is a whole other version of this city, a world of lavish parties and horseback princesses that you will likely never see. The merchant's chatter about high society parties fades as a new sound cuts through the market's din, a rhythmic thudding of hooves and the excited shouts of a crowd. It is a different energy, not the commercial hustle but the thrill of sport. People are moving, almost running, in one direction, towards a large, open field on the edge of the market district. Curious, you leave the tea house and follow the surge of people. You find yourself pressed against a low wooden fence, looking out onto a vast, dusty expanse of grass. At either end of the field stand what look like goal posts. Teams of riders on fast, agile ponies are thundering across the field, a chaotic and beautiful sight. You are about to witness a game of polo. The sport is called Jiu in Chinese, and it is the absolute passion of the Tang elite. Its history is clear and direct. Polo was not invented in China. It came from Persia, traveling along the Silk Road, and the Tang aristocracy adopted it with ferocious enthusiasm. It was the perfect sport for a culture that valued horsemanship and martial prowess. It was fast, required incredible skill, and had just the right amount of danger to be exciting. Emperors themselves were avid players, and the best players in the imperial guard were treated like superstars. You watch, mesmerized, as a player gallops at full tilt, leans precariously far out of his saddle, and with a long-handled mallet, strikes a small wooden ball, sending it flying across the field. His control is breathtaking, and as you watch him, you realize why the hufu you are wearing became so dominant. He is wearing the exact same outfit, a tight-sleeved tunic, QKUA POW, trousers, and soft boots. His clothes are not a fashion statement, they are high-performance athletic gear. The slits in his tunic allow it to drape over the horse without bunching up. The narrow sleeves ensure his arms can move freely to swing the mallet without fabric getting tangled. His soft boots give him a firm grip in the stirrups. To play polo in a traditional, flowing Han robe would be impossible, if not suicidal. The sport and the clothing were a package deal. Then, your eyes widen. You see another player race for the ball, her long hair tied back in a simple knot, flying out behind her. It is a woman. She is just as fierce and skilled as the men, her mallet striking the ball with a sharp crack. As you saw earlier in the market, women playing polo was not a novelty. It was a regular and celebrated feature of Tang life. This is a specific, well-documented fact that continues to fascinate historians. Two murals and pottery figures frequently depict women on the polo field, and historical texts describe matches between teams of court ladies played for the emperor's entertainment. These were not gentle, ladylike versions of the game. It was the real deal, fast, aggressive, and competitive. A small, quirky detail that has been preserved in historical texts is the description of the polo balls themselves. While many were simple, light wood, the most luxurious versions used in imperial games were said to be hollowed out and intricately carved, sometimes with inlaid decorations. The goal was to make them light enough to fly, but strong enough to withstand repeated blows from the mallets. It is a testament to the level of artistry that permeated every aspect of elite Tang life, even their sporting equipment. Watching the raw athleticism and skill on display, you cannot help but think about the deeper implications. This leads to a debate that still circulates among scholars of the period. Was the popularity of polo a reflection of the Tang Dynasty's military might, a kind of peacetime sublimation of cavalry skills, or was it more of a social phenomenon, a way for the aristocracy to display its wealth? A good polo pony was incredibly expensive, and its modern, cosmopolitan identity. The military training theory suggests that emperors encouraged the sport to keep their elite equestrian and fighting skills sharp. The social status theory argues it was more about conspicuous consumption and leisure. A nobleman who spent his afternoons playing polo was showing everyone that he was part of the powerful, horse-riding ruling class and that he did not need to work for a living. It is likely both are true. Playing polo made you a better rider, which was useful for a potential commander, but it also unequivocally marked you as a member of the Tang 1%. The game ends with a final, triumphant goal. The winning team cheers, their faces flushed with exertion and victory. The woman you were watching trots her pony over to the fence, dismounting with a practice tease. She wipes the sweat from her brow, laughing with her teammates. In her practical, stylish hufu, she looks powerful and completely at home. You realize the clothes on your back are not just for show, not just for practicality in the market. They are the clothes of an active, vibrant, and surprisingly egalitarian world, at least for the wealthy. The clothes connect you to the highest levels of aristocratic leisure, to a world of fast horses, thrilling competition, and women who were not afraid to play as hard as the men. You may never ride a polo pony, but for the first time, you feel like you understand their world a little better. The energy of the polo match leaves you feeling invigorated. The sun is beginning to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows down the grand avenues, but the city shows no signs of slowing down. As the crowds from the polo field disperse, many of them head towards the entertainment districts, the parts of the city where the tea houses are bigger. The wine flows more freely, and the sound of music spills out into the streets. You decide to drift along with them, drawn by the promise of spectacle. You end up in a bustling ward known for its taverns and inns. These are not quiet, contemplative places. They are loud, lively, and packed with people from all walks of life. Merchants closing deals, soldiers on leave, scholars arguing over poetry, and young men simply out for a good time. Many of these taverns were famously run by huji, who women, often Sogdian or Persian, who were celebrated for their beauty, their sharp business sense, and their skills as hostesses. You choose a tavern that looks particularly boisterous, its doorway hung with colorful lanterns. Inside, the air is warm and thick with the smell of roasted meat, spilled wine, and perfumed bodies. You find a small space at a shared table and order a cup of the house grape wine, feeling very much the sophisticated man of the world. At the center of the tavern is a small, raised wooden stage. A musician is seated on a stool, plucking a fast, complex melody from a pear-shaped lute, the pipa. The music is unlike the formal court music you have heard about. It is energetic, emotional, and has a driving rhythm that makes you want to tap your feet. Then a dancer takes the stage. She is young and beautiful, dressed in a striking Hu outfit. Her blouse is a brilliant, shimmering green silk, her long, flowing skirt is layered with different colors, and her waist is cinched with a wide, decorated belt. On her feet are soft, red boots. She smiles at the crowd, waits for a new, even faster rhythm to begin, and then she starts to spin. This is the Hujuan Wu, the Sogdian Whirl, the most famous and beloved dance of the Tang Dynasty. Her performance is an act of incredible athleticism and grace. She whirls on the spot, her arms held in elegant positions, her head tilted just so. As she spins faster and faster, her long, layered skirt flares out around her, creating a mesmerizing, blooming flower of color. The movement is so rapid that her individual features blur into a single, kinetic sculpture of fabric and motion. The core historical fact is that this dance, imported from the Central Asian kingdom of Sogdia, captivated Tang society from the lowest taverns to the highest chelsans of the imperial court. Emperor Zhuangzong, one of the most famous Tang emperors, was a huge fan of the dance, as was his notorious consort, Yang Guifei. To be a skilled whirling girl was a path to fame and fortune. As you watch, captivated, you notice a small, peculiar detail that seems almost impossible. Some accounts of this dance, preserved in poems from the era, claim that the most skilled dancers could whirl with such speed and balance that they could do so on top of a small, upturned carpet or even on a wooden bowl. Whether this is poetic exaggeration or literal description is impossible to verify, but it paints a picture of a dance that was not just about beauty, but about breathtaking, circus-like skill. It was a true spectacle designed to awe and amaze the audience. The dancer on the stage in front of you may not be on a ball, but her speed is dizzying, and the crowd roars its approval. This dance, and its immense popularity, feeds into a long-running debate among cultural historians. What did the Tang Chinese find so appealing about this frantic whirling dance? Traditional Chinese court dances were often slow, stately, and symbolic, with performers moving in precise, coordinated group patterns. The Sogdian Whirl was the opposite. It was individualistic, virtuosic, and almost orgiastically energetic. Some scholars argue that its popularity reflects a societal shift, a move away from rigid Confucian ritual towards a more expressive, emotional, and individualistic sensibility, at least in the realm of entertainment. Others suggest it was simply the thrill of the exotic. The dance was so alien, so different from anything they had ever seen, that it was exciting for its sheer novelty. It was a burst of wild, for an energy in the heart of their sophisticated, ordered world. The music comes to a sudden stop, and the dancer ends her whirl with a final dramatic pose, her chest heaving, her face flushed. The tavern erupts in applause and shouts, and a shower of coins is thrown onto the stage. She gathers them with a grateful smile. Her clothes, which seemed so flamboyant and impractical just moments before, now make perfect sense. The long, layered skirt was essential to the visual effect of the spin. The lightweight silk blouse allowed for freedom of movement, and the soft boots gave her the grip and flexibility she needed for her lightning-fast footwork. Once again, you see that the Hu style was not just a passive fashion. It was intertwined with action, with performance, with the most vibrant and exciting cultural imports of the age. To wear Hufu was to align yourself with the energy of the polo field and the dizzying spin of the dancer's stage. You leave the tavern, your ears still ringing with the fast-paced music and the crowd's cheers. The wine has left you with a pleasant warmth, and the streets, now lit by the soft glow of lanterns, seem friendly and full of promise. In your new clothes, you feel a part of this vibrant nightlife. You are modern, you are cosmopolitan, you are Tang. As you pass a brightly lit mansion, the gates of which are open for a gathering, you hear snippets of conversation and laughter. You feel a sense of belonging. But then, a sharp, disapproving voice cuts through the pleasant haze. You turn to see two older men standing near the entrance to a quiet, scholarly-looking library. They are dressed in the old style, deep, voluminous robes of dark, somber colors, their sleeves so long they have to be folded back over their arms, their hairs neatly bound in formal caps that look heavy and severe compared to your light fu to yo-yo. They are looking out at the street scene with undisguised contempt. Look at them, one of them says, his voice a dry rasp, preening like foreign peacocks. The men look like acrobats and the women look like men. No decorum, no propriety. The other man nods slowly, stroking his long, thin beard. The rites are collapsing. The music is degenerate. When the proper forms are abandoned, how can the state remain strong? This obsession with frivolity is a sickness. It rots the core. You stop in the shadows to listen, your heart sinking a little. In your fashionable bubble, you had forgotten this. Not everyone was thrilled with the new trends. For every nobleman throwing a Persian-themed party, there was a conservative Confucian scholar shaking his head in dismay. This is a crucial historical reality. The Hu craze faced significant backlash from the traditionalist establishment. These were men who had dedicated their lives to studying the ancient classics, which prescribed a strict social order and a detailed code of conduct, known as li, or rites. This code governed everything from how to address your father to what clothes you should wear. For them, the loose flowing robes of the Han and Jin dynasties were not just clothes. They were the physical embodiment of a civilized, hierarchical, and morally upright society. The wide sleeves forced graceful, deliberate movements. The long robes encouraged a dignified posture. To these men, Hufu was an abomination. The tight sleeves, the short tunics, the very act of revealing the shape of the legs in trousers, it was all seen as vulgar and barbaric. It was the clothing of action, not contemplation, of the soldier and the merchant, not the scholar and the official. They saw it as a rejection of everything that made their culture great, and they wrote about it. You can find poems and memorials from the period lamenting the decline of traditional dress, complaining that the new fashions were making it impossible to tell a man from a woman, or a civilized Han from an uncultured barbarian. Here is a small, telling detail that illustrates their point of view perfectly. In the traditional system, your social inferiors were supposed to bow deeply to you. The long, flowing sleeves of your robe would sweep towards the floor in a gesture of profound respect. In a tight-sleeved tunic, a bow is just a bow. The grand visual reinforcement of the social hierarchy is gone. For the old guard, this was not a small loss. It was a symptom of society unraveling, of essential social distinctions being blurred by a foolish fashioned trend. The two scholars continue their lament, their voices low and urgent. This scene brings to life a major debate that historians of social history grapple with. How deep did this conservative resistance run? Was it just a few grumpy old scholars writing angry poems, or did it represent a powerful undercurrent of cultural anxiety? Some scholars argue that the mainstream of Tang society was so confident and so in love with the new styles that these conservative voices were a marginal, irrelevant minority. They were the cultural dinosaurs of their day, unable to adapt to a changing world. But other historians argue that we should not dismiss them so easily. They suggest that this tension between the cosmopolitan, open, loving culture and the traditional, inward-looking Confucian culture was a central dynamic of the Tang Dynasty. It was a constant push and pull. The partygoers and polo players might have had the upper hand for now, but the traditionalists were always there, waiting in the wings, convinced that this foreign madness would eventually lead to ruin. You look down at your own clothes, which felt so right just moments ago. Now seen through the eyes of these two men, they feel subversive. Your practical tunic is an insult to propriety. Your comfortable boots are a rejection of civilized grace. Your stylish hat is a mark of frivolity. You realize that your simple act of changing your clothes was not just a personal choice. It was a political statement. It was taking a side in the great cultural war of your time. You chose the side of the new, the exciting, the foreign. The two scholars, wrapped in their layers of tradition, represent the other side. They turn and retreat into the quiet darkness of their library, leaving you alone in the lantern-lit street, suddenly aware that the clothes you wear are more than just fabric. They are an argument. The words of the two old scholars linger in your mind, a discordant note in the city's symphony. It makes you wonder. You have seen the fashion, you have worn the fashion, but how did it all actually happen? A trend this massive does not just spring from the earth. It needs messengers, advocates, and influencers, to use a modern term. It is not enough for a prince to wear a new style of hat. Someone has to bring the hat to the prince in the first place. Who were these people, the vectors of this stylish contagion? You start to see them everywhere now that you know what to look for. You see a caravan preparing to leave the city at dawn, the Sogdian merchants shouting orders, their colorful clothes a stark contrast to the gray morning mist. They are the most obvious conduits. For centuries, they were the middlemen of the Silk Road, their merchant colonies sprinkled in oases all the way from Samarkand to Chang'an. The core historical understanding is that these merchants did not just carry goods, they carried culture. When they arrived in the capital with a shipment of Persian glassware and spices, they also brought their clothes, their music, their religion, and their language. They were talking advertisements for a different way of life. A young, impressionable nobleman might see a particularly successful Sogdian merchant wearing a handsome brocade tunic and think, I want to project that same aura of wealth and worldliness. But it was not just the merchants. You see a group of Buddhist monks, their heads shaved, walking in a silent line. Their robes are simple, but their presence reminds you of another powerful channel of influence. Buddhism, which had become a major force in China, was an imported religion. Monks and pilgrims were constantly traveling between China, Central Asia, and India. They brought back scriptures, relics, and artistic styles that had a profound impact on Tang society. While the monks themselves wore religious vestments, the lay patrons who funded their temples and monasteries were often the same wealthy aristocrats who were at the forefront of the food trend. The international connections fostered by the spread of Buddhism created a mindset of openness to foreign ideas, which likely spilled over into secular areas like fashion. A lord who reveres a monk from India is perhaps more likely to try a tunic from Persia. Then there are the diplomats. You see a procession leaving an official building, a group of men whose faces and attire mark them as envoys from a foreign court, perhaps the Uyghur Khaganate or a Korean kingdom. The Tang court was a diplomatic hub. It received tribute and emissaries from dozens of kingdoms. These encounters were highly ritualized and created intense points of cultural contact. The gifts they brought, the clothes they wore, the retinues they traveled with, all of it was scrutinized by the court. This is a well-documented aspect of Tang foreign relations, and it is a two-way street. Tang envoys sent abroad would also return with new tastes and goods. And here is a more specific, less obvious vector of transmission: the military. The Tang army was a massive, multi-ethnic force. It incorporated large numbers of Turkic and other non-Han cavalrymen who were prized for their equestrian skills. When these soldiers served on the frontier, they wore the practical gear of their homelands. When they were rotated back to the capital, or when Han Chinese officers returned from long postings on the frontier, they brought the styles with them. A general who has spent 10 years fighting alongside Turkic horsemen might become so accustomed to the comfort and practicality of their boots and tunics that he continues to wear them back in Chang'an. His prestige as a military hero would then make the style aspirational for the young men of the city. This complex web of transmission leads to an ongoing scholarly discussion. Can we trace the Hufu phenomenon back to a single point of origin? Or was it a case of multiple simultaneous introductions? Traditional scholarship often focused heavily on the Sogdian merchants as the primary drivers of the trend. However, more recent research emphasizes the importance of these other channels: the diplomats, the monks, the soldiers. The single source theory is being replaced by a network theory. It was not one group, but a constant overlapping flow of people and ideas from many different directions that created the critical mass needed for the trend to take off. It is like a conversation where you cannot quite tell who started it, because everyone seems to be talking at once. You think back on your day. You bought your clothes in a market likely dominated by Sogdian commerce. You saw women dressed for polo, a sport from Persia. You heard music in a tavern that came from Kucha. You now understand that you are swimming in a sea of cultural currents that have flowed for thousands of miles to converge right here in this city. The clothes on your back are the final destination of a journey that began in a mountain yurt, a desert oasis, or a frontier garrison. You are wearing the entire Silk Road. You pass by the towering red walls of the imperial city, the administrative heart of the empire, and a bold question pops into your head. You have seen this fashion on merchants, dandies, women, and soldiers. You have heard it was all the rage at aristocratic parties. But what about the man at the very top, the son of heaven himself? Did the emperor of the great Tang Dynasty, the ultimate symbol of Chinese civilization, ever swap his majestic, dragon-embroidered ceremonial robes for a tight-sleeved tunic and a pair of leather boots? The thought is almost scandalous. The emperor's attire was deeply symbolic, a core part of the state's ritual and ideology. The long, flowing robes, the flat-topped mortar-board crown, mian, the specific colors and symbols, all were prescribed by centuries of tradition to project an image of serene, cosmic authority. To imagine him dressed as a nomadic horseman feels like a contradiction in terms. And for the most solemn state occasions, like the great sacrifices to heaven and earth, this is absolutely correct. The historical record is clear in these formal settings. The emperor wore the traditional, ancient ritual vestments to represent his role as the linchpin between the human and divine realms. But the emperor was not always performing sacred rites. He was also a man. He hunted, he feasted, he played sports, and he relaxed in his private palaces. And in these less formal moments, the evidence gets much more interesting. Take Emperor Taizong, the dynasty's co-founder. He grew up in a culture heavily influenced by the northern nomads, was a brilliant horseman and military commander, and was famously open to foreign ideas. Historical texts describe him speaking the languages of his Turkic allies and being comfortable with their customs. While there is no explicit account of him strolling through the palace in full hufu, it is almost certain he wore more practical, equestrian-style clothing when engaged in activities like hunting. Then you have Emperor Xuanzong, who reigned during the absolute peak of the Hufu craze. This was the emperor who loved the Sogdian Whirl dance and who was a passionate polo player. It is inconceivable that he played polo wearing long, flowing robes. He absolutely would have worn a version of Hufu on the polo field, likely a fabulously luxurious one made of the finest silks. In fact, a small, delightful detail comes from a famous painting called Emperor Xuanzong's Flight to Shu. Though it was painted later, it depicts the emperor and his entourage escaping a rebellion. In the painting, Xuanzong is on horseback, and he is clearly shown wearing a red, round-collared, tight-sleeved robe, a classic piece of fashionable, practical wear, not the cumbersome robes of state. This leads to a deeply nuanced and still debated question among historians. How did the emperors balance these two identities? On one hand, they were the guardians of Chinese civilization, the chief practitioners of Confucian rites. On the other hand, the Tang imperial family's own identity was proudly multicultural, with roots in the barbarian north. They were rulers of a vast, multi-ethnic empire. Their clothing choices must have reflected this duality. Some historians argue that the emperors masterfully code-switched their attire. They would wear the appropriate ritual robes for formal court sessions to appease the conservative scholar officials, and then change into comfortable hufu for their leisure time, reflecting their personal tastes and their role as leaders of a martial equestrian savvy elite. It was a conscious separation of their public, ritualistic duties from their private, aristocratic lifestyle. Other scholars suggest the lines were more blurred. They argue that the adoption of whose styles, even in semi-official contexts, was a deliberate political statement. By wearing the clothing of the steppes, the emperor was signaling his mastery over those regions and his role as a universal ruler, a Khan of Khans, not just an emperor for the Han Chinese. It was a way of visually claiming legitimacy over the vast, non-Han parts of his empire. The debate hinges on intentionality. Was it personal preference and practicality, or was it a calculated political performance? As you stand there, looking at the imposing walls of the palace, you picture the scene. Inside, past those gates is a world of immense complexity. You imagine the emperor's wardrobe. It must have been vast, containing not just one identity, but many. There would be the breathtakingly ornate dragon robes for high ceremony, but tucked away in another chest would be the silk tunics and soft leather boots for a morning ride or a polo match. The emperor did not just have one uniform, he had a costume for every role he had to play. And the fact that a foreign-inspired outfit was one of those key costumes tells you everything you need to know about the confidence and cosmopolitanism of the dynasty he ruled. He was not just the son of heaven, he was the most fashionable man in the most fashionable city on earth. As twilight deepens and the lanterns glow brighter, a sense of clarity descends upon you. You have been swept up in the glamour of it all. The dashing horsemen, the whirling dancers, the aristocratic parties. It is easy to see the hufu craze as a purely aesthetic phenomenon, a delightful but perhaps frivolous pursuit of the exotic. But as you walk through the less glamorous side streets, away from the main thoroughfares, you start to see a different side of the story. You see a man repairing a cart, his movements quick and efficient in his worn-out tunic. You see a woman hauling buckets of water, her trousers and boots far better suited to the task than a long dress would be. You start to think beyond the fashion and consider the function. You now realize a core historical truth that is easy to overlook. Behind the dazzling facade of fashion, the hufu trend was profoundly rooted in good, old-fashioned pragmatism. Society was changing. The Tang Dynasty at its height was an era of unprecedented mobility. The Grand Canal and a network of roads and post stations made travel easier than ever before. Commerce was booming. Cities were growing. People were on the move, and they needed clothes that could keep up. The slow, graceful, and restrictive clothing of the past was designed for a world that no longer existed for many people. Think about your own transformation. The first thing you felt when you put on your new outfit was not that you looked so fashionable, but that you could finally move. This was a revelation shared by countless people. For a merchant who had to load and unload his own goods, narrow sleeves were a godsend. For a government courier who had to ride for days on end, trousers and boots were not a style choice, they were essential equipment. Even for a simple city resident navigating the crowded streets, the ability to walk quickly, step over obstacles, and not have your clothes get caught on things was a massive quality of life improvement. And here is a wonderfully mundane yet important detail. Think about hygiene. The long, flowing robes of the past, with hems that often dragged on the ground, were constantly getting dirty. They were difficult to clean and required a lot of fabric. A shorter tunic and trousers were inherently more hygienic. They stayed cleaner longer and were easier to wash. For the average person who did not have a legion of servants to do their laundry, this was a significant advantage. This was not the kind of thing poets wrote about, but it was a powerful driver of cultural change. This utilitarian perspective fuels an important academic debate. Did the hufu trend start with the elites as a fashion statement, and then trickle down to the masses who adopted it for practical reasons? Or was it the other way around? Some bottom-up theories suggest that the practical benefits of this clothing were first recognized by working people, soldiers, and merchants, those whose livelihoods depended on mobility. The elite, seeing how efficient and dynamic this style looked, then adopted and romanticized it, turning it from workwear into high fashion. The top-down theory, which is more traditional, argues the opposite, that the glamour and prestige of the court and aristocracy were so powerful that common people adopted the style to emulate their social superiors, with the practical benefits being a happy coincidence. The most likely answer is that it was not a simple one-way street, but a feedback loop. The military and merchants brought in practical designs from the frontier. The aristocracy, with their love of the exotic and equestrian pursuits, made these designs fashionable and high status. This, in turn, made it socially acceptable for everyone to wear them, allowing the practical benefits to spread throughout the entire population. The polo-playing prince and the cart-repairing laborer ended up wearing the same basic outfit for entirely different reasons, yet they reinforced each other's choices. The prince made it cool, and the laborer proved it worth. You stop and look at a group of men sharing a meal of noodles from a street vendor. They are laughing, gesturing, completely at ease. They are wearing simple, functional tunics, just like yours. There is no Sasanian silk or jade belt in sight. This is not about making a grand statement about being cosmopolitan. This is just life. It is the background hum of the city. The Great Hufu trend was not just a revolution that happened on the polo fields or in the palace halls. It was a quiet revolution that happened every single day, in the streets and workshops, driven by the simple human need for clothes that made sense in the world you actually lived in. The glamour was the spark, but it was the pragmatism that made the fire catch and spread. Your journey through Chang'an has been a lesson in looking closer, in peeling back layers of meaning. You have learned to see the difference between a simple tunic and a nobleman's finery, to understand the story told by a belt or a hat. Now you decide to try a little game with yourself. As you sit on a bench near one of the city's many canals, watching the people go by, you try to guess who is a genuine Huron, a foreigner from the West, and who is just a local Han Chinese person who has enthusiastically adopted the latest fashion. At first, it seems easy. You see a man with deep-set eyes, a prominent nose, and a thick, curly beard the color of rust. He is speaking to his companion in a language that sounds nothing like the local tongue. His skin is weathered, and he carries himself with the quiet patience of a long-distance traveler. He is unmistakably Sogdian. His clothes, a simple, practical robe and cap, are not a costume, they are his native dress. He is the genuine article, the source from which the fashion flows. Then you see a group of young men swaggering out of a tavern. They are loud, laughing, and speaking the purest Chang'an dialect. Their features are clearly Han, but they have gone to great lengths to look the part. They have let their sideburns grow long and bushy, in imitation of the Sogdians. They are wearing brightly colored tunics and have daggers tucked into their belts, cultivating a fierce, martial look. One of them has even dyed his hair a slightly lighter brownish shade. They are the mimics, the fashion victims, the local boys who think dressing like a foreigner makes them look tough and cool. This much is straightforward, but the longer you watch, the blurrier the lines become. This is the central historical challenge. The intense cultural fusion of the Tang Dynasty makes easy categorization impossible. You see a man whose features look mixed, perhaps the son of a Han mother and a Turkic father. He speaks the local language flawlessly but has a slight accent. You see another man who looks completely Han, but he is a practicing Zoroastrian, heading to a small fire temple tucked away in the West Market. His clothes are local fashion, but his heart and soul belong to a Persian god. And here is a fantastic, niche detail that highlights the confusion, the term Huron itself. For the people of the Tang, this was a convenient, but incredibly imprecise catch-all term. It literally means who people, but it was used to refer to dozens of distinct ethnic and cultural groups. It could mean a Persian who followed Zoroaster, a Sogdian who was a Buddhist, a Tucharian from Kucha, a Turkic nomad who worshipped the sky god Tenji or even an Arab or a Jew from further west. To the average person in Chang'an, these distinctions were often blurred. They were all just who. This simplification makes it incredibly difficult for modern historians to untangle the specific influences of each group. When a poem mentions a Hu wine cellar, The text does not specify if she was Persian, Sogdian, or Uyghur. The label conceals more than it reveals. This ambiguity feeds directly into a scholarly debate that is still very active about the extent to which foreigners in Chang'an assimilated into Han society. The traditional view was one of a powerful, confident Chinese culture that eventually absorbed all who came into its orbit. Foreigners who settled for generations would gradually adopt the language, customs, and even the surnames of the Han, their descendants melting into the great cultural pot. However, more recent scholarship, based on archaeological finds like tombstones with foreign scripts and the excavation of foreign temples, paints a different picture. It suggests that many of these foreign communities maintained their own distinct cultural and religious identities for centuries. They lived in Chang'an, participated in its economy, but they did not simply become Chinese. They created vibrant, multicultural enclaves within the larger city. So, the game you are playing is harder than you thought. You see a woman wearing a wihimo, the veiled hat. The style is a Hu import, but it has become so thoroughly a part of Chang'an fashion that it tells you nothing about her ethnicity. You see a man with a daisy belt. It is impossible to know if his grandfather was a steppe warrior, or if he just bought it last week because it was fashionable. The clothing, which at first seemed like a clear marker of identity, is actually a source of deep ambiguity. In this city, you could wear the clothes of a foreigner without being one, and you could be a foreigner without looking like the stereotype. You give up your game, realizing it is impossible to win. The styles have crossed so many borders and been so thoroughly mixed and matched that a person's outfit is no longer a reliable passport. It is a statement of taste, of aspiration, of profession, or simply of comfort. Chang'an, you conclude, is a city where you can be whoever you want to be. And the first step to becoming that person is choosing what to wear. You have been in Chang'an for some time now, fully immersed in its rhythms, its fashions, and its intoxicating blend of cultures. The city feels like the entire world, the only place that matters. But one day, business calls, or perhaps just curiosity, and you find yourself traveling outside the magnificent city walls. You take a road leading east towards the agricultural heartland of the empire. The transition is striking. The grand, 100-meter-wide avenues give way to dusty country roads. The symphony of the city fades, replaced by the chirping of insects and the distant calls of farmers in their fields. You expect the world of fashion to vanish completely, for everyone to be dressed in the simple, timeless garb of country folk. And for the most part, you are right. You see farmers in wide-brimmed straw hats and simple hemp shirts, their clothes practical in a way that has nothing to do with trends. But as you pass through a small but prosperous market town, a satellite of the great capital, you see something that surprises you. You see echoes of Chang'an. A young man, clearly the son of a wealthy local landlord or merchant, is strutting down the town's main street. He is wearing hufu. It is not the expertly tailored silk you saw on the dandies in the capital, but a homespun version. The tunic is made of coarse, locally woven cloth. The cut is a little less sharp, and the boots are sturdy work boots rather than elegant riding shoes. But the intention is unmistakable. He has the short tunic, the trousers, the belt. He has seen the styles from the capital, and he is doing his best to replicate them. He is the small-town version of the fashionable man you have become. This is a key historical point. Major cultural trends, especially in an empire as well connected as the Tang, never stay confined to the capital. They radiate outwards, carried by merchants, travelers, and officials influencing provincial life in countless ways. You stop at a local inn for a meal, and you see more subtle adaptations. The innkeeper's wife is not wearing a full Hu outfit, but she has abandoned the traditional floor-length dress for a shorter robe worn over trousers, allowing her to move quickly between the kitchen and the main room. She has not adopted the style for fashion, but for the same reason the city dwellers did. It is just easier. In a corner, a local musician is strumming a tune for the patrons. He is not playing a fast-paced Sogdian Whirl, but a local folk song. Yet, the instrument he is playing is a round-bodied lute, a country cousin of the pear-shaped pipa you saw in the city tavern, its own design influenced by Western instruments. And here is a charming niche detail. Archaeologists excavating provincial tombs from the Tang era often find tomb figurines or menki that mimic the high-fashion ones from the capital. But instead of being finely crafted and beautifully glazed, they are simpler, cruder, made of rougher pottery. You might find a figurine of a polo player, but the horse is chunky and the details are clumsily painted. These objects are a touching testament to the desire of people in the provinces to participate in the glamorous culture of the capital, even if they could only afford a budget version of it. It is the ancient equivalent of buying a knockoff designer handbag. This observation of the trend's diffusion brings up a significant topic of debate for social and economic historians. They discuss how this fashion knowledge actually traveled. Was it primarily visual, with a young man like the one you saw simply visiting the capital, seeing the style, and then describing it to his local tailor? Or was it more direct, with tailors from Chang'an moving to provincial towns, bringing their high-fashion patterns and skills with them? Some historians argue that the movement of officials throughout the empire was key. When a magistrate was appointed to a provincial post, his family and retinue would arrive dressed in the latest capital fashions, providing a direct and influential example for the local elite to copy. Others suggest that traveling merchants were the main conduits, not only selling fabrics but also describing the popular ways to wear them. It was likely a mix of all these things, a slow and imperfect transmission of ideas from the center to the periphery. As you leave the town and head back into the open countryside, you look back at the landlord's son. To a visitor from the far west, he might look like a typical Chinese man. To a sophisticated resident of Chang'an, he would look like a country bumpkin trying to hard. But to you, he is something more interesting. He is a signpost, a marker of the capital's immense cultural gravity. The trends born in the crucible of the West Market and the imperial palaces are so powerful that their ripples can be felt even here, miles away, transformed and simplified, but still recognizable. The desire to be modern, to be part of the great, exciting world is not just a city phenomenon. It is a human one. You return to the familiar grandeur of Chang'an, feeling a renewed appreciation for its status as the uncontested center of the world. The years pass. The seasons turn. The food trend, which once felt so new and revolutionary, has become the established norm. Your own tunic is no longer a statement, it is just what you wear. The city is prosperous, the markets are full, and the confidence of the empire seems unshakable, as solid as the great city walls. Then one day in the year 755, a rumor trickles into the city, a piece of news so shocking that at first, no one believes it. It speaks of a rebellion, a massive one, led by a man named Lushan. This is not just a minor border skirmish. And Lushan is a powerful general, a favorite of the emperor, a man who commands a huge, battle-hardened army on the northern frontier. And the detail that sends a chill down every owner's spine is this: Lushan is not Han Chinese. He is of mixed Sogdian and Turkic descent. He is, in the parlance of the city, a Huron. The news gets worse. The rebel army is sweeping south, overwhelming the imperial forces. The man who was once the emperor's darling, the celebrated barbarian general, is now the ultimate traitor, marching on the capital itself. The core historical event known as the Lushan Rebellion was a cataclysmic turning point for the Tang Dynasty. It was a brutal, devastating conflict that would last for years, shattering the peace and prosperity of the High Tang and shaking the empire to its very foundations. The emperor himself, the great Xuanzong, would be forced to flee the capital in disgrace. Suddenly, everything changes. The feeling on the streets is no longer one of confident openness, but of fear, suspicion, and betrayal. And that suspicion begins to land on anything and anyone associated with the Hu. The very things that were once celebrated as chic and cosmopolitan are now viewed with distrust. The word Hu, which used to mean exotic and fashionable, now tastes like treason. You see it in people's eyes. Your neighbor, who once complimented your Sogdian style belt, now gives it a sideways glance. The friendly Turkic merchant in the West Market, who has lived in Chang'an his whole life, is now met with stony silence. This is when the backlash that the old conservative scholars had been waiting for arrives, but with a ferocity no one could have predicted. It is no longer a matter of cultural preference. It is a matter of national security. You start to hear a new, ugly sentiment being whispered, and then shouted, that our obsession with these foreign ways weakened us, that we trusted a barbarian, and he betrayed us. This connection, however unfair, becomes a powerful narrative. The who dancers, the who music, the who clothes. It all gets conflated with the rebellion. It is seen as a symptom of the cultural sickness that allowed a monster like an Lushan to rise. Here is a specific, tragic detail of this cultural reversal. The Emperor Xuanzang had a personal bodyguard of powerful Turkic horsemen. He also had a stable of dancing horses that were trained to perform intricate routines to who music at his banquets. After the rebellion broke out and the emperor fled, these horses fell into the hands of the rebels. Later, when an imperial general was hosting a feast, he had his musicians play the old court music. The trained dancing horses, hearing the beat, instinctively started to perform their routine. The general, not knowing their history, thought the horses were possessed by demons and had them killed. This story, whether literally true or not, functions as a powerful allegory. The beloved, exotic performers of the old era were now misunderstood and destroyed in the new atmosphere of fear and paranoia. This sudden shift has been a major point of analysis for historians, who debate if the Lushan rebellion single-handedly killed the Hu culture craze. Some historians argue that yes, the rebellion was a fatal blow. The trauma of the war created a wave of xenophobia and cultural conservatism that made the open, confident cosmopolitanisms of the previous era impossible. The elite turned inward, rejecting foreign styles and ideas, and began to promote a more purely Chinese cultural identity. Other scholars argue the shift was more gradual. They suggest the trend was already beginning to fade naturally and that the rebellion simply accelerated the process. They point out that even after the rebellion, trade on the Silk Road continued, and foreign influences never disappeared completely. But they were different, less celebrated, more suspect. The debate is about whether the rebellion was a sudden cataclysm or the final push in a longer, slower process of change. You walk the streets of your beloved city, and it feels different. The joy has been replaced by anxiety. The vibrant, colorful clothes are still there for now, but they seem to carry a new, dangerous weight. You look at the people around you, and at your own reflection. The clothes that once made you feel like you belonged to the most exciting city on earth now make you feel vaguely conspicuous, even complicit. The dream is starting to crack. The rebellion rages on for years, a bloody tide that washes over the empire, leaving devastation in its wake. Chang'an itself is captured by rebel forces, then recaptured by the imperial army, aided by foreign Uyghur cavalry. The city is scarred, its population thinned, its confidence shattered. Even after the rebellion is finally suppressed, the world it created is gone forever. The high-spirited, optimistic era of Emperor Xuanzang is a distant memory, a story told to children about a golden age. You walk through the same streets, but the atmosphere is heavy with loss. The Tang Dynasty survives, but it is a shadow of its former self. The central government is weaker, the military is dominated by regional commanders, and the economy is in shambles. And the culture has changed profoundly. The old openness has been replaced by a new defensive posture. The easy, casual mixing of han and hu is a thing of the past. The word hu is now almost exclusively a pejorative term. The most visible sign of this change is on the bodies of the people themselves. The fashion is turned. You see fewer and fewer men in the tight-fitting tunics and trousers of the old days. The style that once seemed so modern and efficient now looks faintly archaic, a relic of a naive and decadent era. Instead, men are returning to the older forms of dress. Robes are becoming longer, sleeves wider. The silhouette is loosening, becoming more flowing, more deliberately traditional. It is a conscious and pointed rejection of the foreign styles that are now associated with rebellion and chaos. You see it most clearly with the women. The sight of a woman in a man's style tunic, riding astride a horse, is now exceptionally rare and would be seen as scandalous. The pendulum has swung back hard towards Confucian conservatism. Women are once again encouraged to be modest, demure, and to retreat into the domestic sphere. Their clothing reflects this. Dresses become fuller and longer, hiding the shape of the body. The bold, vibrant colors and exotic patterns of the past are replaced with more subdued and proper aesthetics. The Hu Shaowang makeup, with its dramatic blush and painted forehead flowers, vanishes completely, dismissed as the vulgar face of a fallen age. A key historical marker of this shift is the government's renewed interest in enforcing some PTU laws. In the freewheeling days before the rebellion, people largely wore what they could afford. Now, the weakened court tries to reassert its authority by strictly regulating dress. Edicts are issued, attempting to control what materials and styles can be worn by each social class. There is a particular focus on prohibiting outlandish or barbarian clothing. While these laws are difficult to enforce perfectly, they send a clear message: the era of stylistic experimentation is over. Conformity and tradition are the new watchwords. And here is a small, sad detail that speaks volumes about the fading dream. In the West Market, many of the shops once run by Sogdian and Persian merchants are shuttered. Some families fled the chaos of the war. Others found that the old, easy tolerance they had enjoyed was gone, replaced by suspicion and hostility. The vibrant international character of the market is diminished. It is still a place of commerce, but it has lost much of its global flair. The river of culture that once flowed so freely from the West has slowed to a trickle. This period of cultural retreat has sparked a debate among historians about whether this was an inevitable correction or a tragic loss. Some scholars influenced by traditional Chinese historiography have viewed this post-rebellion period as a necessary return to core cultural values. They argue that the High Tang's obsession with foreigners was a form of cultural weakness and that the trauma of the rebellion forced a return to a more stable and authentic Chinese-ness. However, many contemporary historians view this period with a sense of regret. They see the High Tang's cosmopolitanism as its greatest strength and the subsequent turn towards cultural conservatism and xenophobia as the beginning of the dynasty's long, slow decline. They mourn the loss of the open, confident, and creative spirit that made Chang'an the most exciting city in the world. You walk past the tavern where you once watched the Sogdian Whirl dancer. It is still there, but it is quieter now. The music is slower, more melancholic. There are no whirling dancers. The memory of her spinning flower of silk and energy seems like a phantom from a different world. The exotic dream that captivated a generation, that reshaped the very look of the empire, is fading. The bright colors are bleeding out, leaving a more monochrome and cautious world behind. The years continue to spool out, and the city settles into its new, more subdued reality. The memory of the golden age before the rebellion becomes a kind of legend. People speak of it with a sigh, a wistful shake of the head. In the Kaiyuan era they begin before trailing off. The world they describe, full of color and confidence, feels increasingly alien to the younger generation, who have grown up in a more anxious and austere time. One day, cleaning out an old wooden chest, your hand falls upon a piece of fabric folded at the very bottom. You pull it out. It is your first tufu tunic, the dark blue cotton one you bought in the West Market on that transformative day, all those years ago. The color is faded, and the fabric is worn thin at the elbows. But the shape is unmistakable: the narrow sleeves, the lapel collar, the short hem designed for a man of action. You hold it up, and the memories come flooding back. You remember the feeling of shedding your old, clumsy robe, the sense of liberation as you stepped out into the market, a new man. You remember the silent grace of your first pair of boots, the confidence of your futi oyu, the satisfying utility of your daisy belt. Holding the tunic now, it feels like holding a piece of your own youth, a tangible relic from a time when both you and the empire were younger, more adventurous, and more optimistic about the world. This is a quiet, personal moment, but it reflects a broader historical process. The clothes of a bygone era become artifacts. They sit in the back of wardrobes, get packed away in chests, or eventually cut up for rags. Their original meaning, as symbols of high fashion, rebellion, or practicality, fades away, replaced by a new layer of meaning, nostalgia. For you, this simple tunic is no longer just a piece of clothing. It is a portal to the past. It smells of the dust of the West Market, of the wine from the Sogdian tavern, of the excitement of the polo field. It represents a lost world, Here's a small, poignant detail about how this past was preserved. While the fashion itself disappeared from the streets, it was immortalized in art. The two murals painted during the High Tang, with their vibrant depictions of life, became time capsules. Long after women stopped wearing men's clothes to go riding, the image of the confident horsewoman in her colorful tunic remained, frozen in plaster on a tomb wall, waiting for future centuries to rediscover her. The art outlived the reality. It is because of these murals that we know so much about the year's fashions. The artists, simply by capturing the life around them, provided an invaluable record of a world that was about to vanish. This process of forgetting and remembering is a subject of great interest to cultural historians. They debate how a society decides what to keep from its past and what to discard. The post-rebellion Tang society made a conscious choice to discard the Hufu trend from its daily life, associating it with a painful and dangerous period. And yet, the memory of that era's glamour and power was never entirely erased. It was preserved in poems and stories and most vividly in art. The debate is about how this cultural memory functions, whether it is an accurate reflection of the past or a romanticized, simplified version. The art, for instance, tends to show the lives of the rich and powerful. The simple, practical reasons that a common laborer wore a tunic are less likely to be recorded for posterity than the image of a prince playing polo. The glamour is remembered while the pragmatism is often forgotten. You fold the tunic carefully and place it back in the chest. It does not belong in your world anymore. It is a ghost. Wearing it on the street now would be like wearing a costume from a play. It would be an act of bizarre eccentricity, not of fashion. Its time has passed. But as you close the lid on the chest, you feel a quiet sense of gratitude. You were lucky. You lived through the peak. You were there when the city was a kaleidoscope of cultures, when the future seemed boundless. You got to wear the clothes of a golden age. And as the world outside continues its slow march into a more cautious and conservative future, you have this secret, folded away in the dark, the memory of a time when everyone in China wanted to dress like a foreigner. Many years have passed. You are older now, your hair streaked with silver, your steps slower. Chang'an is a different city. The dynasty is weak, plagued by ambitious warlords and peasant uprisings. The grandeur is still there in the bones of the city, in the massive walls and wide avenues. But it is a faded grandeur, like a beautiful silk robe that has been worn for too long. The vibrant, confident spirit you knew in your youth is a distant echo. One day you visit a monastery on the outskirts of the city to see a friend, an elderly monk who spends his days copying scriptures. As you are leaving, he shows you a treasure he has just acquired for the monastery's collection. A long, horizontal scroll, a painting by a famous court artist from the old days. He unrolls it carefully on a long table. It is a hand scroll designed to be viewed a section at a time, moving from right to left. The painting is titled Spring Outing. The first section shows a group of aristocrats setting out from a palace gate, and as you look at the figures, your breath catches in your throat. It is all there, exactly as you remember it. The men are on horseback, handsome and vigorous. They are wearing tight-sleeved tunics of brilliant blue and green, cinched at the waist with ornate daisy belts from which hang their personal effects. Their heads are crowned with stylish black fu tiou, its soft legs trailing behind them. They ride with an easy confidence, their soft leather boots firm in the stirrups. Then you see the women. They are not in carriages or palanquins. They are on horseback too, riding astride just like the men. One of them is wearing a stunning crimson robe, another a soft yellow. They are laughing, their faces animated under their fashionable Hu makeup. One of them looks back over her shoulder, a playful expression on her face. It is an image of pure, unadulterated joy and freedom. This is the central point. Art became the final refuge for the lost world of the High Tang. While society moved on and fashions changed, the painters of the era had captured its essence, preserving it in ink and color for all time. The monk gently scrolls to the next section, revealing more of the hunting party as they ride through a blossoming landscape. And here you notice a small, incredibly detailed element that a casual observer might miss. One of the noblemen is reaching into a small bag attached to his belt. The artist has painted the intricate tooling on the leather of the bag and the glint of the metal buckle. Another figure has a trained hunting cheetah perched on the back of his saddle, a practice imported from the West. These tiny, realistic details make the scene come alive. It is not a generic, idealized portrait. It is a snapshot of a real moment, full of specific, authentic details. These paintings are among the most valuable primary sources historians have for understanding the material culture of the period. As you gaze at the scroll, you are struck by a question that art historians have debated for generations. Are these paintings accurate, documentary-style depictions of life as it was, or are they idealized, romanticized visions of aristocratic leisure? The realist school argues that court painters were masters of observation and that these scrolls are as close as we can get to a photograph of the 8th century. They trust the details from the cut of a robe to the style of a saddle. The idealist school, however, cautions that these paintings were made for an elite audience. Their purpose was to flatter their patrons and to present a perfect, harmonious vision of their lifestyle. They argue that the scenes might be staged, the clothes a little too perfect, the smiles a little too bright. The paintings, they contend, show us the world as the aristocracy wanted to be seen, which is not necessarily the same as how it truly was. You continue to scan the painting, your eyes drinking in the details. You see the patterns on the silk, the powerful muscles of the horses, the joyful, energetic postures of the riders. For you, this is not an academic debate. This is your youth, brought back to life with heartbreaking clarity. The painting does not just show you what people wore, it shows you how they live. It captures the spirit of the age, its confidence, its love of action, its embrace of the wider world. It is a world where men and women rode together, equals on the field, dressed in the vibrant colors of the Silk Road. The monk, seeing the look on your face, smiles gently. A beautiful dream, is it not? He says. You can only nod, your throat tight with emotion. The scroll is the ghost of a world you once knew, a world that now exists only in memory and on silk. It is a testament to a time when life itself felt like a work of art. The monk carefully rolls the scroll back up, and the vibrant world disappears once more into the darkness. The scroll is rolled up, the memories are put away, but life, in its persistent, quiet way, goes on. Decades pass. The Tang Dynasty, which once seemed as eternal as the stars, is now crumbling, a magnificent old tree rotting from the inside out. Warlords carve up the land. The central government is a phantom. You are an old man, a true relic, and you have outlived an empire. You sit in a tea house, a much quieter, more dilapidated version of the ones from your youth, and watch the city's slow decay. One afternoon, a group of young, swaggering soldiers passes by. They are part of some new warlord's personal army. Their armor is functional, but you notice something. The leather cuirass is of a style you have never seen, and the helmets have a strange, foreign-looking plume, perhaps influenced by tribes from the south or the jungles of Nanshao. A merchant at the next table is trying to sell a new kind of fabric, a cotton print from the distant southern seaports. A new world is asserting itself with new influences, new trade routes, new fashions. You cannot help but smile a little. You have seen this before. It is the beginning of another cycle. The great historical trend after the Lushan Rebellion was a powerful cultural retrenchment. This was the era of fugu, or returning to antiquity. Scholars, officials, and poets consciously rejected the barbaric and frivolous influences of the High Tang and advocated for a return to what they saw as a pure, more authentic Han Chinese aesthetic. Wide sleeves and long robes came back into fashion, not as a trend, but as a political and moral statement. It was an attempt to dress the wound of the rebellion with the comforting bandage of tradition. But as you look around this tea house, you realize the return was never total. Here's a small, profound detail that everyone takes for granted you, and everyone around you are sitting on chairs. You are sitting on tall, wooden stools. In your grandfather's time, before the Hufu craze really took hold, proper etiquette demanded kneeling on woven mats. Chairs and stools were a foreign, barbarian custom brought by the Hu people, yet they were so practical, so comfortable that they were universally adopted. The fashion of the tunic faded, but the function of the chair remained. The foreign custom became so deeply integrated that no one even remembered it was foreign. It became simply Chinese. The great return to antiquity somehow forgot to get rid of the chairs. This long, slow process of cultural change, retreat, and synthesis is the subject of endless historical debate. Historians debate if history is truly cyclical, if societies inevitably swing between periods of xenophilia, a love of the foreign, when they are strong and confident, and periods of xenophobia when they feel threatened and weak, or if the process is more linear and complex, a constant series of negotiations where foreign elements are adapted, or rejected based on 1,000 different factors. Some macro-historians see the rise and fall of Fufu as a perfect case study of a predictable cycle. But you, having lived through it, feel it is not so simple. It was not a clean swing. Some things were rejected, but other things, like the chair, slipped through and became part of the furniture, literally and figuratively. The young soldiers laugh, their strange new plumes bobbing in the sunlight. They think they are the latest thing, the vanguard of a new era. They do not know that they are just another verse in a very old song. They are the new wave of fusion, and in a generation or two, perhaps their styles will be the mainstream. And then, after a crisis, they too will be rejected in favor of a return to some other imagined past. You have lived long enough to see one great turn of this wheel. You saw a foreign fashion arrive as a novelty, become the uniform of a golden age, get blamed for a catastrophe, and fade into a memory preserved only in art and old chests. And now you see the first stirrings of the next turn. The realization brings a sense of peace. Your story is not an isolated one. It is a human one. The afternoon sun is warm on your old, wrinkled hands. The low murmur of the tea house begins to fade into a gentle, soothing hum, a sound not unlike the distant drone of a single bee, or the soft whir of a fan on a quiet night. Your eyelids feel heavy, weighted with the dust of nearly a century. The memories of your life are no longer sharp, sequential things. They are beginning to melt into each other, like watercolors bleeding on wet silk. The crimson of a dancer's whirling skirt, the deep blue of your first tunic, the emerald green of a polo field under a summer sky. They swirl behind your closed eyes, a soft, silent kaleidoscope. You feel yourself drifting, not unpleasantly, on a slow, wide river. The faces float by, the proud Sogdian merchant, the laughing horsewoman, the grim-faced conservative scholar, the old monk with his precious scroll. They are all their companions on this final journey. The sounds of the city, the clatter of hooves, the call of a street vendor, the strum of a pipa, all blend into a single long, resonant chord. The story has been told. The journey through the bustling streets of Chang'an, through the rise and fall of an entire world of fashion, has reached its gentle, quiet end. You are no longer an observer, no longer a participant. You are simply becoming part of the dream itself. The bright colors soften, the sharp edges blur, and everything fades into a peaceful, comfortable stillness, like falling into the softest bed at the end of a very, very long day. The end of the article. Good night.